Y'all, there are folks across the freaking continent that are in a panic about what I've been sharing recently around missing and murdered Indigenous women. They're afraid they'll be outed, whether they're in positions of power or merely employees at a casino or of the Medicine Way or the average Joe or Jolene who's working part-time at the car wash and only trying to supplement their meager minimum wage. They're afraid of jail and of law enforcement, and probably more importantly, how the community will judge them if the community really knows. If things move past like the speculation that's inherent in gossip in the Moccasin Telegraph, where everybody talks about everybody and they know it all, or they make it up if they don't. But y'all, this stuff isn't going to be prosecuted. I mean, come on now. You're not going to be prosecuted. It's not that there's not evidence. There's plenty. There has been plenty for decades. However, even the indictments against Rafael Caro Quintero and the Guzman sons offer no mention of trafficking women and girls for the purposes of prostitution or laundering money through Indian gaming. Though that's all been observed directly, and it's been documented for decades. It's not that there's not evidence. Like, I'm not the only one who knows these things, even though I'm not supposed to know these things. There's plenty of evidence. What there is not is the will for the federal government to prosecute. And I have an opinion about that. It may or may not be true, but it's one shared by many ancestors and the bees and the birds who speak to me about these things. It's this whole, oh well, that's just the way it is. Everybody knows, like that whole attitude across tribal and federal governments, including Canada in this, is allowed to persist because it's a less obvious, somewhat passive way to erase the people without committing a full-blown genocide. Like, if we just allow them to disappear, we'll get what we want from underneath their feet. Or make treaties moot. And then we won't have to deal with those responsibilities that we don't want to maintain. We'll go from out of sight, out of mind, to out of existence, and no one will be the wiser. And again, admittedly, that may not be true, and that's also not to say that there aren't good cops involved in this, but it is true that there's no will for prosecuting, even though there's a trove of evidence. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless others are willing to come forward. And that's a hard row to hoe, because that fear of doing so, the fear of coming forward, is real. It's very real. Across reservations, the average person, even law enforcement, just doesn't have the means to withstand swift and deadly retribution if they speak out loud. To say something after you see something, or to say something when you know something, is a clear invitation for death or threats of it by individuals whose impunity apparently cannot be policed. I'm aware of all that. And I'm aware of the nuances of logistics and sneakiness and the paradox between different elements of criminality and how it can fuel freedom and independence for a few, how it can support some needs across a variety of communities, all while killing, maiming, and creating a hopelessness that fuels the need for more drugs and other forms of escape that fuel even more desperation and hopelessness. In addition, like, this whole endeavor is tied to so many things historic that it's impossible to talk about the importance of bones without talking about things like forced displacement, and genocide, which very few white folks will understand. They just can't wrap their heads around it because our ideas of both are generally somewhere else. Like, it's over there. It's on another continent, or otherwise removed from our conscious awareness, whether that's selective blindness or not. I don't know. I'm also keenly aware that the role that historic and modern racism plays is as well. Like, the fear inspired by a white woman who openly works with ancestors and others. Like, I do not hold this shit to my chest anymore. As well as the manner in which spirit comes to life outside the selective safe places like ceremony, or a sweat, and is outside the rules, is also real. That fear of it is real. Fear of me is real. However, there is something so much more deep that I have tried to articulate for years and haven't been able to. Like, I couldn't wrap words around it. But a few years ago, there was an opinion piece written by a guy named Garry Wills in the Washington Post, about the Catholic Church and the sexual predation within it. And he expressed so well what I had been trying to wind words around. And I quote, "The trouble with any culture that maintains layer upon layer of deflected inspections is that when so many people are guarding their own secrets, the deep examination of an institution becomes nearly impossible. The secrecies are too interdependent. Truly opening one realm of secrecy and addressing it may lead to an implosion of the entire system." His words, especially in the context of institutionalization or institutionalized sexual exploitation in Indian country, and the attempts at covering it up, ring true to me in this idea of my secret is safe with your secret. But I'm at the point where that entire system here, though, and this is not a humble opinion at all, it needs to implode. It needs to cave in on itself so that something new can be built upon it. The effects of colonizers ripping people from their land, the rape of women, that's as much theirs for the taking as the land was thought to be, the forced ripping of children from their families into institutions made to kill the Indian but save the man, all the while also killing the children, combined with the multitude of individual experiences of child rape within families and communities, have created this weaving of secrets. Like, there is layer interlaced with layer, interlaced with another layer of secrets, and from those secrets come fear, and it's communal, and it's individual, and it's sexual, and it's spiritual, because you can't separate those things. Like, you can't separate them in the case of the fuckery any more than you can separate them from discussions about any religious institution and its abusers. And all of this is threaded through entire lineages. And all of this is what has begat the situation that indigenous cultures are now in related to the fuckery. We cannot talk about the disappearances of indigenous children and women without honestly addressing these incredibly painful histories and modern things. We have to talk not just about like the priestly pedophiles, but the uncles and fathers and brothers and doctors, the medicine men, and all those who want to pretend they're something other than predator. We have to talk about why the rape of babies, toddlers, adolescents, and teens exists, and how it's perpetuated across communities in Indian country. We have to talk about the estimates of sexual abuse in many, many communities being estimated between 65 and 85%. That means for every 100 girls who actually reach 18 years of age, 65 to 85 of them will have been raped by a family member or a friend of the family, by a boyfriend, by no friend of theirs, or some safe professional. Said in another way, of 10 females, 6 to 8 of them are raped repeatedly by those people before legally becoming adults. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about why, once sexual exploitation has become adopted as a survival mechanism or the measure of a female's value, how those effects create the avenue for further exploitation to meet the needs for basic safety and for the proximity to love. And for those ignorant of the legacies wrought by the plundering of the continent's first peoples, like, these things may seem like they're in the distant past, they're somewhere else, they're far removed from any modern view or modern lived experience of the world, except they're not. They're right here. They're right now. And it must be faced. It has to be faced because the intentional institutional disappearing of indigenous women and children, girls especially, are inextricably entwined within these layers of history and abuse and rape. And so there's, in this midst of all of these churning energies and the outreach from the ground that moves through me, and that of the water and the sky and this hum of prayer that moves between me and sand and soil, I bear witness. I am the witness to this uncompromising beauty, the most powerful love of the holiest ground beneath our feet, and what it means by its absolute goodness. I've shared before, like, the confusion and despair when I was ignored by tribal leadership, when I reached out across the continent to over 400 elected tribal folks in the early part of 2021. Whether the attempted communication was with Osage or Crow or Ojib or Blackfeet, or Cree, or Shoshone, or Cheyenne, or Pima, or Lakota, and the silence I was met with then was as deafening and deadening as the very audible "keep your mouth shut" that I was told repeatedly from the Cree contingent back in 2017. That was a far, far cry from the experience in 2015 when the relationship with, or my relationship with the ground was cemented. In round 3 of a sweat, an old Sioux dude named Ivan moved into me. And as I began drumming on the ground, or he was drumming through me on the ground, there was nothing I could do to stop my body from doing it. I was drumming and he shouted through me to those folks who thought this sweat was just an AA meeting with some steam and prayer. He hollered, "Listen!" And I was like, what? I was as much, what the fuck is that? As they were. Like, I didn't know what he meant. I didn't understand that he was speaking of now. He was speaking 10 years into the future. He hollered through me, and while everyone else was freaking out, stunned into silence and anger, I was dropped into the ground. There was an interior part of me that I had not been properly introduced to before, and that was Aspen. And while I'm in this sweat, drumming into the ground, she awakened in me and pulled me into the ground. She pulled me into the ground and took me straight under the Great Lakes, reconnecting me with Lakota, Ojib, Dene, Iroquois, and more stories, and the lifelines and death lines from the north all the way down into the south. And it kept going until she was done showing me all of the places that I have been planted and where all of the remains of these women and children have been planted. And until she was done showing me that the mother root moves through me, and through which, in its own very unique mycelial-like structure, binds me to her and to them. That single experience, entwined with so many others over the course of the past 10 years, is why I trust when the sand speaks, when the wind shoves and the ground hums to help me bring those bones home. There'll be a part 2 in a little bit. Bye, y'all.